million, and then for a spouse you get an additional 3 million.
Yeah, I think it's 1.5 million, I believe, and then another 3 million if you have a spouse. But you have to allocate the basis between all the assets that have basis, so it would be real estate and stock and all of that.
Right.
And also the biggest problem is you have to actually calculate basis, so you have to kind of keep track of what the old basis was. These are things we haven't had to do for a long time.
So an issue is going to be, you're going to have to find, if you're an executor, somehow whatever documentation you can find related to the assets that this decedent had bought. And that's part of the reason we experimented actually with carryover basis many years ago, and it was abandoned because it's just not practical. And so there's a good chance, we really believe, that the Congress is going to take some action on this before the end of the year, but we don't really know because they can't seem to agree on much.
Right, with all the things they've been not agreeing on, I'm not so sure.
Okay. So let's move along. Are there legal issues for spouses holding property as community property versus joint tenancy property? So I think we're talking more about how the title companies have handled this in the past and so forth.
Well, yeah, there are lots of legal issues with titling in general. So there's a number of legal issues, but I think the most significant one, and probably the one you're thinking about, is that when a husband and wife own property with its joint tenants, it's possible for one of the spouses to try to unilaterally sever the joint tenancy by some documentation, and there's a lot of litigation over that.
Yes.
But by doing that, what you do is you create a situation where the spouse doesn't have right of survivorship if you can manage to sever the joint tenancy.
Right.
With community property, each spouse has control over their half of the community property. They could leave it to somebody else, but they can't change the status of the property necessarily unilaterally without some kind of agreement by the other spouse or some kind of court proceeding or something. So it's something that I think as a spouse you have more awareness of and more ability to deal with than you would if somebody just managed to sever a joint tenancy and surprise you.
Okay. What is community property? We've been waiting all the time for this. What is community property with right of survivorship, and what problems has it solved?
Right. Well, community property, as I said, it applies to married couples and registered domestic partners. And this particular form of title was created to solve the problem of people having to resort to joint tenancy with right of survivorship for married couples if they wanted to try to use right of survivorship. By having this new form of title, they can have community property. They can have the full step-up in basis if one of the spouses dies, because it's community property on its face. But they still have the element of right of survivorship in there, so that potentially you can still avoid probate if that's what you want to do. I don't necessarily recommend that, as you might guess, because of the other problems.
Yes.
I think having a good estate plan is better than trying to rely on what order people are going to die in, for example.
Yes.
But you're able to do that, so it gives you a better situation than you had with the old joint tenancy with right of survivorship for married people.
Right.
Or, as I said before, domestic partners.
So there's two things related to this. One is that historically, the title companies, when a person bought real estate, or a couple bought real estate, married couple, or registered domestic partners, they would automatically write the title as joint tenants. It was like the default.
Right. Yeah, for many years that was true. They've gotten to where they ask people now more. But for many years, they were much more comfortable, and I think at many levels within the title company, it was just sort of the way they do it.
Yeah.
So if you wanted it done a different way, you really would have to push them to make them do it in some other way. They really wouldn't want to do it a different way.
Right.
I think that has improved a lot. But there are, just some reasons I think title companies thought that was a better way to do it. It has something to do with the way title companies work, and also I think it just became a regular practice.
Yes.
So for years you would see almost all titles listed
joint tenants.
Right.
The attorneys knew that they had something to do as soon as they got the person in the door. Okay. The other thing related to this that I just wanted to mention is the federal government does not recognize community property for registered domestic partners. Right. So they do not get this double step up, and so they need to be aware of this. It's creating all sorts of headaches for
That's
estate
true.
planners. California does recognize it, so you're going to get a basis adjustment for both for California, but not for
That's right. That's
for
correct.
the IRS. Okay. What about title considerations for entities like trusts and family partnerships?
Again, people do this for all kinds of planning reasons, trusts primarily to avoid probate on these assets. You need to be careful. We mentioned before about not taking shortcuts. And you need to be careful because there are a lot of implications. Getting the title right is one thing, and that's important enough. But anytime you record a document, you go through a whole process with the recorder's office and the county assessor's office. Here in California, primarily they want to know if the assessor wants to know if they can reappraise properties. Again, with values down, that's not as critical as it used to be, but at one time it was, they could only reappraise on change of ownership, so they're always looking for change of ownership. There are very specific exclusions from these rules, both for real estate property tax purposes, but also for transfer tax purposes. Transfer taxes are paid when you record documents. And these rules are very specific, and if you try to shortcut, so let's say you decided you put your property into a trust, a living trust, and then you wanted to transfer it to your children before you died. You wouldn't want to transfer it directly from the trust to the children because there isn't an exclusion for transfers from trust to children. There is an exclusion in these rules from transfers from parents to children. So you would want to do it in the right order. You'd want to take it out of trust, put it back in the name of the parents, and then give it to the children. That's just an example, but whenever you're dealing with entities, you have all of these other considerations to take into consideration so that you're avoiding increases in assessments and trying to avoid transfer taxes if possible by taking the steps in the right order.
All right. And I think one of the things that you sort of salted in there, I just wanted to highlight is it is important to just make sure that the title is changed. So many cases when you go to what we call a mill, a trust mill or a boilermaker operation where they're churning these things out, they may not be taking care of some of the details.
Right.
And one of those details is to assure that you're getting the benefits of the trust or the partnership that you're setting up is to assure that the title is in fact held consistently with that. And so you need to change the title of a real estate, for example, to your living trust if you have one. We're really out of time, so there's some other material. I just want to mention that a big part of this whole area that we're talking about is for property tax considerations, as Bill did raise the issue. And so that's something really that's going to need attention when you get legal advice. So, Bill, thank you again for being with me. And I hope that we'll have an opportunity to get together and do another one of these interviews another time. And folks, pay attention to your title, get some legal advice when you're dealing with this stuff, and I hope I'll see you next time on Financial Insight.